Okay, so everyone please find a seat. We're going to get started. The show on the road, since there's so much content to cover. There's also, if you haven't seen it, there's a handout at the registration table. Oh. Can you hear me now?
Better.
Better, okay. I'm usually loud, so.
You're not allowed to use a Verizon trademark.
All right, well, we'll probably hear better now. Welcome to CBRS 2.0, announcing the next generation of spectrum sharing with the U.S. military. I'm Michael Calabrese. I direct Wireless Future here at New America's Open Technology Institute. And we've been working on CBRS for a long, long time. So glad to see it's improving. We will hear first from the three federal agencies, NTIA, DOD, and FCC, that have collaborated to effectively, well, first to implement and now to hugely expand private sector sharing of prime mid-band spectrum with the U.S. Navy. We will then hear from the other essential part of this collaboration, industry, and specifically from a leader of the CBRS Industry Association and of WinForum, the multi-stakeholder standards group. Finally, we'll have a panel discussion on how this collaboration came about, the diverse range of use cases it enables, and what this leap forward in dynamic spectrum sharing of military spectrum means for the studies and initiatives outlined in the administration's national spectrum strategy. One more thing before we bring up our three government keynoters, a bit of history. I realized speaking to reporters this past week that unlike the spectrum nerds sprinkled around this audience, most folks don't know the origin or groundbreaking nature of CBRS, starting with the fact it stands for Citizens Broadband Radio Service, which is John Leibovitz here? Maybe he's online. I think he came up with that, a riff on CB radio. Prior to 2015, 2/3 of this 150 megahertz band was reserved exclusively for Navy radar operations, which, some of us pointed out at the time, left the band unused inland. Unfortunately, although it seemed safe enough to assume there were no Navy ships in Iowa, the coastal exclusion zones that would have been necessary to protect Navy radar would also have excluded half the U.S. population. The remedy, it turned out, was to rely on an automated coordination system. In 2012, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology recommended that a dynamic coordination system could allow commercial use at lower power and on a secondary basis while protecting military systems from harmful interference. In fact, the PCAST report even envisioned a spectrum superhighway of sharing all through the 3 gigahertz band. The FCC picked up on this recommendation and ultimately proposed a path-breaking innovation itself, a dynamic 3-tier spectrum sharing framework. In 2015, the Commission adopted the initial framework and rules authorizing this world-leading 3-tier sharing framework, which hasn't even been equaled yet. Many European countries are now copying CBRS, although they're doing it through manual coordination. The 3 tiers are incumbents, principally military systems, but also some fixed satellite sites, priority access licensees. So there are 7 PALs, a total of 70 megahertz that were auctioned 4 years ago in each county nationwide, and general authorized access to another 80 megahertz, licensed by rule, but similar to unlicensed, in other words, unprotected sharing. GAA must protect PALs, and both GAA and PAL users must protect the incumbents in the band. GAA can also operate in unused PAL spectrum, a novel use-it-or-share-it approach that is paying huge dividends for schools, rural WISPs, and many enterprises. We will be hearing more today about the spectrum access systems, so remember the acronym SAS. The SAS is grant or take away the permission of devices to operate on particular channels and in particular protection areas, depending on incumbent operations. We'll also be hearing about dynamic protection areas, DPAs, which are the geographic areas where the SASs ensure CBRS devices cause no interference when a federal radar system comes in range. All of this is explained more fully with before and after maps in the FAQ handout available at check-in, or if you're online in the chat on Slido. And we'll see those maps a little later. More than 1,000 CBRS providers today have been operating since commercial use began 4 years ago, deploying nearly 400,000 access points and proving that dynamic spectrum sharing can work at scale. That takes us to the present and to the recent collaboration and evolution to CBRS 2.0 that our speakers will now explain. So first up is someone who is coming home when she comes to New America. My friend Sarah Morris serves now as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary and Deputy Administrator at NTIA. She joined NTIA in March of 2022, leaving a huge hole here, as the agency's Senior Advisor for Broadband. Sarah moved to NTIA from New America, where she directed our Open Technology Institute and had become one of the leading advocates and experts in the public interest community on a range of broadband policy issues, from affordable connectivity to privacy and more. So welcome home, Sarah.
Thanks, Michael. And yeah, it's fun to be back. As Michael noted, had either the Assistant Secretary or I joined today, you would be getting a former OTI director at the podium. But I'm so thrilled that you get me. These are issues that I've worked alongside Michael on for many, many years prior to going into government. And now these are issues that I'm really excited to talk about from the government perspective, because there's so much great work happening. So thank you, Michael. Thank you to New America for hosting this well-timed event. And I'm truly happy to be here to celebrate the collaboration and technical work that brings us here today. As a starting point, the Biden-Harris administration is committed to evidence-based spectrum policy and management. Relying on sound scientific research is the best way to advance the high-tech areas of our economy, including telecommunications and other wireless industries. This approach rightly puts engineers and technology developers where they should be, at the core of spectrum allocation decisions, licensing, and long-range planning. There is no better example of the success of this strategy than the evolution we are seeing today in the Citizens Broadband Radio Service, or CBRS. I'm proud to be here today to discuss, and yes, brag about what we've been doing to create the next phase of CBRS. I'd like to acknowledge the engineers and policymakers from across NTIA, the Navy, the Federal Communications Commission, and other agencies who came together to do the hard work of advancing this critical framework. We can learn positive lessons about the vision, collaboration, and dedication of our engineers if we stop and reflect a bit about how we arrived here. CBRS was groundbreaking in its inception. It was born out of the desire to make the most efficient use of 3.5 gigahertz spectrum. We had a large block of vital midband spectrum that showed promise for commercial development, yet was also home to key Navy radars. At the same time, there was interest in supporting the spectrum needs of wireless carriers while also expanding opportunities for non-traditional users to access and innovate with high-grade spectrum. Engineers solve problems, though, and together, the engineers from NTIA, DoD, and the FCC devised the CBRS framework. From a regulatory perspective, it created a three-tiered licensing and access structure that protected existing military radar service while layering PALs, priority access licenses, and opportunistic use GAA, or general authorized access, across a national market. From a technical standpoint, it introduced a dynamic automated access approach that combined sensors with a spectrum access system to govern the commercial operations in defined dynamic protection areas. When the CBRS ecosystem rolled out some 5 years ago, it was forward-looking and innovative, and it has continued to grow. NTIA's Institute for Telecommunications Sciences found that once deployment began, CBRS equipment rollout increased steadily. There was a cumulative 121% increase over a 21-month period through December 2022. More recently, the OnGo Alliance reported that CBRS deployments have continued to increase. More than 1,000 different operators were using 370,000 active CBRS transmitters in the 3.5 gigahertz band by the end of 2023. In reviewing the performance of the CBRS technologies and systems, engineers have found that CBRS works. Not a single example of harmful interference to federal operations has been reported. CBRS is a success, but we have not rested on our laurels. Instead, we have investigated how to sharpen the tools and rules of the sharing framework to allow more unfettered use of CBRS equipment while still protecting those important military radars. I'm excited that we found a path forward. Recent changes to the aggregate interference model are intended to improve shared access to the 3.5 gigahertz band by reducing the size of those dynamic protection area neighborhoods along coastlines and around federal facilities throughout the country, decreasing the number of services that are suspended during federal operations, and better reflecting real-world operations in our modeling. As noted in our letter to that our Office of Spectrum Management at NTIA sent to the FCC last week, implementing these changes will expand unencumbered service to roughly 72 million more people. In all, that would equip CBRS to serve a total of about 240 million people nationwide without preemption by federal operations. The evolution of CBRS spectrum sharing shows how a collaboration among government and industry stakeholders can lead to meaningful commercial spectrum access while protecting vital government systems. In many ways, the CBRS experience has been captured in the DNA of the National Spectrum Strategy. The type of collaboration among agency engineers has been a practical model for the enhanced collaborative framework the strategy calls for among federal agencies, the Commission, and industry. The success of CBRS has also helped reinforce the initiatives calling for the creation of a dynamic spectrum sharing demonstration and testbed, and also the work toward a common sharing platform for federal to federal and federal to non-federal spectrum sharing. To close, the importance of the expansion of CBRS is twofold. First, the engineering and regulatory upgrades will spur continued growth and development of the broadband market in the 3.5 gigahertz band. And second, because CBRS has been a practical application of dynamic spectrum sharing, its evolution will help us advance sharing techniques and approaches in the future. I want to congratulate and celebrate the spectrum engineers and policymakers who developed the bold and innovative CBRS solution to spectrum scarcity in the 3.5 gigahertz band, and thank all of the advocates and experts that helped promote this approach, including Michael Calabrese, over the years. I hope that we can continue to seek creative avenues when faced with similar future challenges and opportunities. Thank you again, and I look forward to the rest of today's event.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate you coming. Next up is Carrie Pasquini-Thompson. Carrie currently serves as Deputy Director for Spectrum Policy and Innovation and as Spectrum Relocation Funds programs for the Department of Defense, which is part of the Office of the DoD's Chief Information Officer. Carrie retired from active duty in the U.S. Army in September of 2022. She served as an Army signal officer for, hard to believe, 23 years, right? And has experience in all aspects of communications. So, Carrie?
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. And a special thanks to Michael and New America for the invitation to speak and participate in this important forum. For those that do not know me, I'm Carrie Pasquini-Thompson. As Michael said, I'm the Deputy Director of Spectrum Relocation Funds Programs for the DoD CIO, Electromagnetic Spectrum Enterprise Policy and Programs, otherwise known as MSEP, and I'm honored to be speaking with you today. It is certainly an exciting time to be part of the CBRS community. Although I've only been serving in my role for a little less than a year, I am amazed by the progress made across the spectrum. Spectrum access is increasingly important to both government and industry alike. DoD has long supported spectrum sharing as one of the best ways to balance government and industry imperatives. CBRS provides one of the best examples of this commitment and demonstrates that spectrum sharing solutions can be achieved to benefit all spectrum stakeholders. Since FCC first authorized use of CBRS band in 2020, we have come a long way in a relatively short time. Since then, more than 1,000 CBRS operators have deployed nearly 400,000 broadband access points nationwide. A diverse range of local users, from factories to airports to sporting arenas and libraries, are now expanding the use of the band. At the same time, the U.S. Navy can continue its use of the CBRS band for radar operations, which is critical for the range of national security missions, including homeland defense. I hope to share some of our most notable milestones from the past year with you today. I think if you look over the past year and even the entire history of CBRS, you will find a common element to each and every success we have enjoyed: collaboration and coordination. We at DoD are grateful for our partners in industry who have collaborated with us on this journey. As many of you know, our success did not happen overnight, and it did not happen in a vacuum. Instead, we have made small, incremental improvements, which were only made possible through our Interagency Joint Working Group, IJWG, in which we convened the Spectrum Access System, SAS admins, and federal agencies, DoD, NTIA, and FCC, to discuss issues and concerns, conduct analysis, develop solutions, and most importantly, implement change. Over the past year, this group has enjoyed multiple notable achievements, including establishing an automated portal scheduling system known as TARDIS 3, and allowing CBS users to access the band while environmental sensing capability sensors were still being deployed. Reducing the reauthorization requirement, splitting the China Lake Dynamic Protection Area, DPA, into 2 DPAs, and modifications to the aggregate interference model. These are just a few of our collaborative accomplishments over the past year. I will now provide a few details on each. In 2022, Hawaii Electric Company asked FCC, NTIA, and DoD to consider using a portal-based scheduling solution near Hawaii until the ESC sensors could be locally deployed. Working collaboratively, we were able to develop a temporary portal scheduling system known as TARDIS 3. And by last September, this enabled CBRS users in Hawaii to access the band while the ESC operators continue their efforts to deploy the sensors. Also, last September, we were able to reduce the period required to reauthorize Citizen Broadband Radio Service Devices, or CBSDs, from once every 5 minutes to once every 24 hours in geographic areas and portions of the spectrum band outside of the scope of current federal operations. To provide a bit more specificity, this means that for assignments in 3.55 to 3.7 gigahertz bands, CBSDs outside of the DPA neighborhoods may continue to transmit for up to 24 hours on the approved grants without the SAS reauthorization. Similarly, for assignments in 3.65 to 3.7 gigahertz band, CBSDs inside the DPA neighborhoods may continue to transmit for up to 24 hours on approved grants without SAS reauthorization. And lastly, for their assignments in 3.55 to 3.65 gigahertz bands, CBSDs inside the DPA neighborhoods may continue to transmit no more than 5 minutes on approved assignments without SAS reauthorization. All told, these changes created more stability and predictability for all band users while continuing to protect critical incumbent federal operations. And then just a few months ago, we refined the China Lake Portal DPA to enable greater access in the band. Previously, the DPA Category B neighborhood spanned from approximately Mesquite, Nevada, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That is about 272 kilometers as the diameter. This large DPA encompassed several cities, including Bakersfield, Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Las Vegas. When the portal DPA was activated, users in these areas experienced interruption to their service. After thorough analysis, the Department of Navy determined that the portal DPA was divided into 2 separate DPAs, one for ground and one for air. This significantly decreased the size of the Category B neighborhoods. Doing so enabled greater spectrum access for users, including those residing in the cities I have mentioned. And finally, the reason we all are here. I will discuss one of our most significant improvements to the CBRS framework, modifications to the aggregate interference model use in the band. Specifically, the model now includes time division duplex and loading factors, accounting for clutter loss and the use of 50% confidence and 50% reliability for the propagation loss calculation. Once these changes are implemented, it may be possible to decrease the size of the DPA neighborhoods along the coastlines and around federal agencies, decrease the number of CBSD grants that are suspended when a DPA is activated, and lastly, increase the fidelity of the propagation model. After demonstration and testing to ensure these changes can be implemented effectively and pending FCC approval, SAS administrators will be able to enact these changes. This will allow CBRS to provide uninterrupted access to mid-band spectrum to approximately 72 million more people, including those residing in major population areas such as Atlanta, Phoenix, Las Vegas, San Antonio, and Pittsburgh, expanding the total unencumbered CBRS area to roughly 240 million people nationwide. Again, none of this would have been possible without a strong collaborative efforts between industry and government. This truly has been a team effort, and it was no easy task to make these improvements in the CBRS framework. I would like to give a shout out to the Spectrum team at the Department of Navy. Your time and efforts you put forth to make these improvements have not gone unnoticed. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the SAS administrators. Thank you for your patience, and as we conducted the analysis needed to be done so the changes could be implemented. I'm excited to see what's next for CBRS as this ecosystem spectrum evolves. I believe our good work has only just begun and the best is yet to come. Thank you again, and I look forward to our continued collaboration.
Thank you, Carrie. And now we have the third agency in the triumvirate, the FCC. Jonathan Campbell is here, representing FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel. Jonathan is the Chairwoman's legal advisor for Wireless International and Space. He has worked on wireless policy at the Commission in a variety of roles, including as Chief of the Auctions Division and legal advisor to the Chief of the Wireless Bureau. Jonathan?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks. So I'm excited to join the discussion here about the future of CBRS and spectrum sharing in general. As everybody has already heard, there's been a few big announcements this week. For one, we were Thrilled to join our very close partners at NTIA and the Department of Defense, and particularly Navy, in the announcement of some groundbreaking work that is going to enable more unencumbered access to the 3.5 gigahertz band. On the heels of that, the chairwoman circulated a rulemaking on more improvements to CBRS, and perhaps the loudest announcement, at least in my household, is my first grader has proclaimed her love for Taylor Swift. So I know this is a lot for all of us to process, and I'm not sure, are we ready for this much change? But I think we are, and I'm here to talk about how we can keep this good thing growing. But before I discuss the future, I'd like to take a quick look back. It's been over a decade of work to get us here today. After all, it was NTIA's fast track report, I believe, in 2010 that first recommended the shared use of the 3.5 gigahertz band. And the FCC first proposed the creation of the Citizens Broadband Radio Service in 2012. And a lot has happened between then and now. For example, I now know that Taylor Swift has released 9 albums. And for you Swifties out there, I'm not counting the Taylor's versions in that count. But not to be outdone, the FCC has conducted 11 spectrum auctions, including 2 incentive auctions, and has conducted literally dozens of rulemaking, some that have yielded some really innovative spectrum sharing frameworks, like in 6 gigahertz and supplemental coverage from space. So those numbers, I think, speak volumes about the pace of spectrum policy and the change that it necessitates and that it creates. And today's guest of honor, CBRS 2.0, is emblematic of that change. So let me explain. First, the sharing arrangement that defines CBRS is novel, innovative concept. The multi-tiered access provides flexibility to accommodate a variety of users and use cases. And this is clear in the wide array of deployments that we have seen and the diverse group of users in the band over the past several years. But we also saw this further back. We saw this in 2020 with the auction of the priority access licenses. There were 228 winning bidders for more than 20,000 PALs. And of those 228 winning bidders, there was a diverse group. It wasn't just mobile network operators. It was cable companies, WISPs, energy and enterprise users, utilities, and so many more. And the auction made available the greatest number of spectrum licenses ever in a single auction. And as Michael mentioned, I had a front row seat to this. I was chief of the auctions division. And so I just want to pause and give a brief shout out to the FCC's amazing auctions team. They did a massive amount of licenses with a set of bidders, some of whom were unfamiliar with our processes, all while trying to figure out how to do it at the early stages of a pandemic in a whole new working environment. So a little biased on that front, but in the years since the auction, there has been ongoing growth in deployments in the band using both GAA and PALs. Supporting this diversity and flexibility is the very innovative nature of the band. It's not a one-size-fit-all approach. Users have the ability to pick and choose between different points of entry, PALs, GAA, combination of the both, to support their different use cases. GAA in particular offers flexible, low-cost point of entry with the same equipment and technical rules as priority access tiers. Some industry reports have indicated that the band hosts over 1,000 users, as we've already heard, with different use cases: factories, cities, school districts, hospitals, research centers, public libraries, utilities. The list goes on and on. The innovation, of course, also stems from the SASs. The SAS's assignment of spectrum within the band and coordination and access among the 3 tiers supports the flexibility and diversity that has come to represent CBRS. So second, CBRS is emblematic of the changing spectrum landscape because it was designed to be an iterative, collaborative process with room for continued refinement and innovation. Ongoing collaboration among and within different parts of the government and industry stakeholders continues today to the benefit of all CBRS users. I mean, the reason we are here today, the 2.0 and CBRS 2.0, is the result of a unique partnership between the FCC, NTIA, DoD, to work together to build trust amongst the stakeholders and to keep iterating on the shared mechanics. Carrie discussed many of the great incremental changes that we've been able to make recently. And today we mark perhaps the biggest refinement yet, changes to the aggregate interference model that SAS has used to protect federal operations. And once again, through that collaboration, many of the technical criteria governing CBRS operations near DPA-protected federal facilities was recently modified, and as we can't say this enough, now as the result, there's 72 million more Americans that will have unencumbered access to this vital band. But now, just to reiterate what Sarah said, it's not time to rest on our laurels. We need to continue to build upon the success of the CBRS framework. And so, like Taylor dropped her album just in time for summer, Chairwoman Rosenworcel circulated to her colleagues a rulemaking full of opportunities to cement the gains that we have made in the CBRS band and to support ongoing innovation in that band. So we propose to modify our rules to reflect the mechanisms currently used to protect federal incumbent facilities in the 3.5 band, including adopting the DPA-based protection methodology. We are also seeking input from those building and operating in the band on various improvements that reflect changes in the operational environments for PAL holders and GAA users. Just a few examples include exploring time division duplex synchronization. This was included in CSMAC's recent CBRS report. GAA user coexistence. GAA use has rapidly increased, so we are seeking feedback on how we can support efficient and effective coexistence within the band. SAS connectivity. As we've heard, in light of recent improvements that extended the CBSD heartbeat interval in certain instances, we ask if there are other instances that warrant less restrictive connectivity requirement. And private networks. As I think we'll hear from the panel coming up next, this is a major area of growth for CBRS. And so we seek comment on how we can accommodate additional deployment of private networks in low-power indoor facilities. So last week, we took a collective giant step, and the FCC is exploring what comes next. But this is about more than just CBRS. We must continue to refine our approaches to spectrum sharing. This will be a vital tool, given the limited amount of greenfield spectrum out there and the ever-increasing spectrum demand. The National Spectrum Strategy reflects this as one of its key goals, and the FCC will continue to be an active partner with other federal agencies in exploring improvements to dynamic spectrum sharing in a variety of forms, with the help from commercial industry in defining what dynamic sharing can be and how it can be used. And as part of this effort, the chairwoman announced the establishment of the FCC's Spectrum Steering Team that will lead the FCC's efforts to develop and implement forward-looking spectrum strategy and to execute the National Spectrum Strategy. So on behalf of the chairwoman, I would like to, again, thank our colleagues at NTIA, at DOD. I would like to thank the staff at the FCC, some of whom are watching online, and some of whom are in the room today, who dedicated many hours to all of this improvement. And as well as the industry stakeholders, the SASs, for their ongoing collaboration on CBRS and spectrum sharing. Because like Taylor Swift's world tour, when demand outstrips supply, it's not easy. It's not as easy as just adding more tour dates. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. And it's good to know that you were one of the staff that we were giving a lot of heartburn to when we were advocating for licenses, PALs the size of census blocks. 20,000 wasn't enough. We wanted, 100,000 or something. So, all right. So now we'll go to our industry keynoter. So here to make opening remarks for commercial users is Preston Marshall. Press is chairman of the OnGo Alliance, the industry association that promotes CBRS. His day job is the director of wireless policy and standards at Google. Press is, as much as anyone, if not more, a founding father of CBRS. He was a lead contributor to the PCAST report in 2012 that I mentioned earlier. He developed the first spectrum access system, the prototype that helped seal the deal. And with his colleague Andy Clegg, who's going to come up and show a few pictures, organized and led the multi-stakeholder process at the Wind Forum that has worked continuously for years to develop and refine the technical rules governing sharing in CBRS. And so I'm excited it's out. Press's book, just out last week, Evolving to 6G, the case for a new approach to 6G and beyond, which you need in order to understand why this more intensive spectrum sharing in more bands is going to be at the heart of 6G in reality, I think, as it develops. So, Preston?
Thanks for the plug, Mike. Who would think we could get this many people to come and discuss changes in the propagation model? And the fact that so many of you are liberal arts majors to boot is quite a change. So on part of industry, I really want to thank all of the government team that just spoke for the incredible amount, not just the work they've done, but the open-mindedness and the flexibility they've shown. And so the rest of the program, we're going to skip ahead and talk about what all this means. But I want to talk a little bit about process and how we got here from the industry side. When we started this program, major research in spectrum sharing back in DARPA, I think it was like 2002, since then we've answered, I think, almost all the questions about whether you can share spectrum. The question we've never answered before was, would you be able to do it flexibly and adaptively and mature? Certainly one of the arguments of exclusive use spectrum, kind of the competitive model, has been, oh, it's flexible, it can change, it can adapt. And so the question is, could we do that with shared spectrum? Or would it be a one and done, which many people thought? The FCC wrote rules, NTIA wrote interference, and we all walked away, and that was it. And that would be a failure. And so with the National Spectrum Plan out there, it becomes, I think, increasingly important to answer the question about whether we can really make these regimes dynamic and all. So to get a sense of that, I thought it worth running a little bit of the timeline behind at least what we in industry think of as CBRS 2.0. About 9 months ago, right after the NTIA came out with this report that was really glowing about CBRS, we started to look and say, let's not get too carried away with ourselves and never believe your own material. Let's look at what we're not doing well. And so we saw that the offload capability was really well exploited. One of the major operators made great use of it. MSOs were deploying. It was really successful. During COVID, we saw anchor institutions really become a major part of the CBRS ecosystem, serving underserved areas, particularly when schools were shut down. And I think New America did a lot of work to promote that and help people in that. The area that has been mentioned several times, it didn't really emerge in large volume, was the indoor industry kind of private networks. When PCAST originally was written, and you might, if you go back that far, the advocacy for PCAST was not from the broadband community, it was from the National Economic Council, because they saw this kind of spectrum use as really key to Industry 4.0, telematics, to the economy, to manufacturing. And yet we really hadn't seen a lot of that. So we went back and looked and tried to understand what were those impediments. It's easy to talk to people who had adopted CBRS. We went and we talked to people who hadn't adopted it, who had looked at it and maybe walked away. And we started feeding that back to our government partners. We had a session run by Wind Forum, and we had a number of deployers come in and talk about what were the obstacles to the use. What was good? What were the obstacles? The White House was there. FCC was there. NTIA was there. DOD was there, and within DOD, the Navy was there. And at the end of that meeting, we sat primarily with the NTIA, and we went through and we ended up with 6 initiatives to pursue jointly. So over the last 7, 8 months, we have worked them diligently, one at a time. I'm sure we have tested each other's patience, but we have worked them through. I don't know if Nick in the room? There he is, way back there. Stand, Nick. Nick, it's always good. Mentioned in dispatches. It's really important. I'm trying to help your career here. Anyway, we really had a great working relationship. We worked all of those items together. We spent a lot of work when we built CBRS at the Wind Forum side to try to create trust. we weren't going to just obey the letter of the law. We were going to try to take the true meaning. We put in some extensive training requirements. We certify installers. Some people still hate that. But we tried to do it to prove we were worthy of the government's trust. And I think one evidence of that was the fact that in the last time we went through testing, we spent over a year just running the testing program with an independent government agency. I have sold bomber aircraft off to the Air Force with less work. This time, we agreed on test. We sent our test data in. The government took a look at it. You can all see the letter when it went over to FCC. The government trusted our testing. The government reviewed the work. Trust but verify, to go back a few presidents. But we worked together to make this happen rapidly. So I think before we get and have the industry, we talked to you about, first we'll tell you what CBRS 2.0 is now. But also before we get to the industry panel, I think that second question I posed at the beginning of, can we not only do spectrum sharing one time, but can we evolve it as we learn, as we develop trust, as we get experience with not having interference, so we can adjust the thresholds and push closer to the maximum capacity of the band? I think we all pass that test, all of us in the room, the industry side and the various government sides. We've proven, I think, we can do the kind of things it would take to make the national spectrum strategy work, which is not to set up a set of rules, but to continue to adapt them and learn and begin to trust each other to do the right thing. We will make mistakes, we will have interference, but if we trust each other, we'll also fix it. So I think from the industry side, the shock of this is not that we're not causing interference, but that there has been this incredible amount of cooperation once we brought the issues forward with the government to really make this different. Everyone could have just said, that's the rules, shut up and color. But they didn't. And I think that's a real tribute. And I think we should all walk out of this. I think that's the more important thing about CBRS 2.0, as we look to hundreds of megahertz more than CBRS, is that we've actually proven we can pull this stuff off and continue to make it better and better. So I want to, we've talked about 2.0. For those who haven't been immersed in it, we're going to give Andy 5 minutes to go through what has taken us 8 months to evolve. Andy? Andy Clegg is Spectrum Engineering Director for Google and has been doing all the work I take credit for. Thank you.
Thank you, Preston, and I apologize. I did not match my shirt to the podium like Preston did, but very nice. That's a pretty close match. So very quickly, and most of this information, and maybe even a little bit more, is in the handout that we prepared when you walked in. And I also offer, if you guys want any more details after you leave here, email me. I put my email in that handout document, so if you need more details on this and some of the subtleties and things, feel free to contact me or find me here. So what are the foundations of CBRS 2.0? Carrie did a great job of summarizing them, so in a way you've already heard them, maybe not with a slide, but she did a great job of summarizing them. So one of the main things is that if your CBRS device is at or below 6 meters above ground level, you now get to take into account a significant amount of clutter in the loss between where your CBSD is and potential interference into DoD. And it's not a small amount. I'm not going to, I swore I wouldn't use engineering terms, but it's a very large amount of consideration for clutter. So that has a big impact on the predicted amount of interference that a CBSD is going to cause to the DoD. And then for all devices, regardless of the height that you're at, we're using less conservative assumptions about the statistical nature of propagation. Propagation isn't one number, it varies over time. We're using a less conservative assumption about the statistics. We're also, as mentioned earlier, making less conservative assumptions about the output powers from CBSDs. We don't assume that they're transmitting full power 100% of the time. And instead, we take a more realistic view of CBSDs actually transmitting, on average, a lower amount of power than they're authorized to use. So that also reduces interference. And then also, as mentioned, and this was actually a change from late last year, but SASs will now allow devices to continue to operate for up to 24 hours without checking back in with a SAS if they're outside of any areas that could potentially interfere with the DoD. So that's a big change, makes devices more robust to temporary internet outages. So what's the impact of the changes? That's the important thing. So the impact is principally the area of the country where a device could conceivably cause interference to the DoD is dramatically reduced. And if you're outside of an area where you could, in theory, cause interference to the DoD, you will never be impacted by DoD operations. So the more people we move out of those areas, we call them DPA neighborhoods, explained in the handout, by the way, the more people we move out of those neighborhood areas, that's the more devices that will never be impacted by DoD operations. So a big difference. And even for devices that remain in those neighborhoods, because of these better propagation models, the number of and impact of the disruptions will be less severe than they are now. So in short, greater number of devices completely immune to impacts due to DoD activity, fewer disruptions for the remaining devices. We recognize now deployment-specific models. So, for example, we distinguish between high-power devices that are outside up on tall towers compared to indoor devices that are, on the first floor of a building. And then finally, greater reliability for all devices because of the SAS check-in requirement. So this is, I'm going to just show two pictures of two scenarios. There's actually 5 scenarios total, but this represents the biggest impact. So the red area in this map is if you were a lower power category A device inside of a building, the previous to, coming soon, previous to now, if you were in the red area, you were subject to being impacted. Now the area of impact is that green area, outlined in green, which you can barely see. It's basically hugging the coast. As Preston says, if you can't smell salt water, you probably won't be impacted. So it greatly reduces, dramatically reduces the number of devices that are impacted. The worst case improvement, meaning that this is the smallest improvement, is if you are a high device, high power device on a high tower above 6 meters above ground level. But even in that case, is dramatically less. The red area is where you are currently potentially impacted. The outline of the green is the new impact area. So even there's a significant reduction. That's where the 72 million increase that NTIA and FCC have mentioned comes from. And then finally, when will these be implemented? I won't go all through the details. There's several steps that have to be completed, but a lot of them, the hard part's already been done. I can guarantee you this will be, well, I can virtually guarantee you this will be implemented by the end of the summer, probably considerably sooner than that, but that's our expected timeline. So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks to Preston and to Andy, who's always been my explainer-in-chief of things technical about CBRS. So we're amazingly right on time. It's unusual for a Wireless Future event. But so we can have our panel discussion now. So why don't we, you all come up, Elvira and Manish and so on. Elvira's the first one, yeah. And yeah, Jonathan is one here, and Manish. Preston, you should come back up. Well, you can't speak until, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sit here. We have one more. Jennifer will join us, too. Yeah. So, my competitor. The other SAS, the other big SAS.
No one can compete with you.
The other.
And see, I predicted if you were paid attention at all in my opening remarks, you would be hearing SAS and DPA over and over and over again. So Spectrum Access System and what is DPA again?
Dynamic protection.
Dynamic protection area, right? So what we'll do is I'll introduce each of the 4 panelists who haven't spoken yet for, just to give a few minutes of top-level remarks and so that you know who they are. So starting with Elvira Pierce, who currently serves as Deputy Director of Strategic Spectrum Policy for the U.S. Navy and is the Navy's lead for spectrum relocation policy and CBRS. Elvira has 20 years in spectrum management as active duty military for the Navy. Elvira?
Okay, it's really active duty for the Army, but I still
Oh, I'm
appreciate.
sorry.
But I still appreciate the Navy, absolutely. A couple of things. I did want to give a plug for Nicholas Sorter for keeping.
He won't stand, no matter what you do.
But I can see his eyes. What I wanted to say is I wanted to tell him that I really appreciate how he kept the CBRS IJWG together and helped us to manage expectations, because we're a very lively group. So thank you, Nick. Thank you. So I want to read something on behalf of my Don CIO leadership, Miss Jane Rathbun. So the Department of the Navy is committed to developing a dynamic spectrum sharing capability with our industry partners to appropriately balance national, economic, and defense priorities. So with that said, I think what was key, what Carrie mentioned in the beginning, was 2 C's, collaboration and coordination. So within the working group for the CBRS, what we found is, especially on the Navy's behalf, that we didn't go into the room thinking no. So we went into the room thinking, how can we get to yes? And I think based on all the achievements that you've seen, we found a lot of pathways to yes. That concludes my opening remarks.
Okay. Thank you, Elvira. Next is Jonathan Lewis, who is one of the most ambitious users of CBRS, who is smelling salt water. Jonathan is director of the Innovation, he's the Innovation Division Director at Dade County Miami International Airport. He led the effort to establish Miami as the first airport in the U.S. and the second in the world to follow the IT infrastructure library of best practices in implementing private networks and using CBRS. Jonathan?
Yeah, hi. First, I'd just like to say it's a pleasure to be here. This is an illustrious group of people. And I'd like to say that we, Miami International Airport and Miami-Dade County, we're the end user. So all this hard work that you all have done, which I really am very appreciative of, is we're trying to, at the other end of this, make sense of it all. And through that, our appetite for risk at MIA, because of the fact that we are trying to innovate and to be disruptive so that we can actually improve our passengers' experience, not only our passengers, but also our business partners. We have sort of embarked on this CBRS journey, and there were a lot of people that said, I don't know, it's a little iffy. So we went through the process of first doing some demos and then doing a pilot. And through that pilot, we actually loved the results, and we started to see some use cases that we thought could benefit, again, the passenger and the employees of the airport. And from there, we said, okay, well, we really like this. We needed to be geo-redundant. So then we went back, we got a bigger platform. So now we're at that point, and then the great news is we finally got that implemented, and CBRS 2.0 just was announced. And that is perfectly aligned with my Chief Innovation Officer who's sitting in front of me, Maurice Jenkins' announcement of Smart Airport Transformation 2.0 at MIA. So all these things are aligned, and I look forward to discussing how you all can help us as the end user. Thank you.
All right, terrific. I just realized I could stay here. I have a microphone. So next we have Manish Jindal. Manish is Charter Communications Group Vice President for Wireless Research and Development. Manish is responsible for driving the R&D behind Charter's vision to develop a framework to compete in wireless services, both fixed and mobile, as well as industrial IoT.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And, I want to also invite all the DoD interns, so hopefully you're getting a lot of insights into CBRS, and, you can be big collaborators in future with us. Talking about Charter. So Charter is a leading connectivity company. We provide broadband, video, voice, and mobile services to about 32 million households in 41 states. So, and we've invested a a lot of money into this infrastructure. Just to give you some idea, and from 2019 to 2023, we've invested about $43 billion into this infrastructure. So, we, as part of that, we provide up to a gigabit per second service to over 57 million homes. And we are working on technologies to provide multi-gig service also to these homes. And as part of that, also we provide services over Wi-Fi. In fact, our Wi-Fi 6E solution actually provides up to 2 gigabits per second on that. And so in 2018, we launched Spectrum Mobile, which, and we are now the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing mobile providers in the industry. And we have approximately about 8.25 million subscribers on mobile network. And so as we're looking into this mobile service, we also complement that with our Wi-Fi infrastructure. And so our end users are able to use both Wi-Fi, which actually takes almost 88% of the traffic of the total mobile usage. And by providing this combination of both fast Wi-Fi and mobile service, our users are able to get about 16% more speeds compared to any other mobile operator out there. And so if you look at the CBRS, which is obviously a combination of an impressive collaboration between DoD, NTIA, and FCC, we feel that this has been a big success. And if you look at the infrastructure that's provided by the county-sized licenses, the sharing regime, and the low power, these combinations actually give a rise to a lot of the innovation players, and Charter is part of that new entrant also. And so, I want to applaud the industry between the federal and government to be able to attain this. If you look at the importance of CBRS 2.0, we've been able to reduce in at least one of the markets. I'll give you an example, and Andy, to your point, we've been able to reduce the CBSD base stations to almost reduced by 100%. So if virtually none of our CBSD base stations are getting impacted by DPA. And so we can definitely attest to all the good work that has been done, that we are seeing extremely positive aspects of this, and we believe that going forward we will be able to provide the mobile service at even more fast and cheaper, and it'll have less impact to our end users using CBRS network. So congratulations on all the hard work you guys have done. And I do believe that as part of the Wi-Fi and CBRS, and by the way, we did win about 210 licenses in 106 counties in about 36 states. So we are one of the largest CBRS users when it comes to the spectrum that we won in that auction. And by 2025, we believe that between our out-of-home Wi-Fi, with our Wi-Fi and partners Wi-Fi, which is going to be almost 50 million access points, and the CBRS, we'll be able to provide pretty much seamless connectivity across the nation. Now, Charter is a new entrant, and if you look at the CBRS technology, in order to make sure that a seamless connectivity happens when we transfer from our CBRS network to our MVNO relationship with Verizon, we had to create a new technology called DSDS, which stands for Dual SIM, Dual Standby. And this technology did not exist when we started to work on CBRS and the system that would switch between our CBRS and MVNO. And over the years, we've tested and we've tried technologies, and now we started to work with all the handset providers. And so after a lot of tests and everything, this DSDS capability exists in all iPhones as well as Samsung phones. And so we've been able to accomplish this and be able to provide a seamless connectivity and switch between CBRS and the MVNO networks. And as part of doing that, we started the test in Charlotte. We've actually now have a commercial system in Charlotte. We're working on CBRS next generation base stations also. And as part of that, we will be implementing those in Georgia and Alabama. So we look forward to deploying more and more networks on CBRS in a very effective manner. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Manish. Can't help but to show some of the diversity here as far as use cases. The largest winner of CBRS priority access licenses was Verizon, but now cable, I think overall the industry has 15 million mobile subscribers or more.
Yep.
So it's interesting, everybody's finding a use. And Jennifer will hopefully tell us a bit more about that. Jennifer McCarthy is a telecom regulatory attorney and vice president for legal advocacy at Federated Wireless, which is the other primary spectrum access system coordinating the use of CBRS. Jennifer also chairs the Regulatory Affairs Working Group for Dynamic Spectrum Alliance.
Thank you, and the OnGo Alliance now, too.
Wow, great.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here, and Michael, thank you for having me. This is exciting. The jovial attitude, I think you're all feeling it. Everyone's happy. Everyone's in a great mood. We've accomplished something amazing here together, right? I mean, we had a really novel idea, as Preston mentioned, quite some time ago. We were able to construct a sharing framework through partnerships with the U.S. Department of Defense, FCC, NTIA, and industry. And not only did we prove that it was a raging success, but we're finding ways to continue to evolve that capability in this system. And I'm just looking forward to what else we can do together. But this is a major accomplishment. And I just want to thank everybody for everything that you've done, and the IJWG in particular. Nick, your leadership, DoD's participation. Elvira, thank you for all of the work that you've done. This is fantastic, and I just want to emphasize that a lot of work has gone into this. I shout out to my colleague Masood Ulfat for his leadership with the SAS admins, all of the SAS admins, everything that you've done to make this possible. So thank you. And who's benefiting from this? All of the users are, whether you are a private institution using a private company or service provider using CBRS spectrum, or a public institution. School systems, for example, are benefiting from these relaxations that we're about to implement after this collaborative effort to improve CBRS. We've got private networks who are manufacturing electric vehicles in Texas that are going to be benefiting from these DPA relaxations. Electric Cooperative in South Central Texas, GVEC, they use CBRS spectrum not only for their smart grid, but also to provide broadband connectivity to their community and beyond. They are going to be benefiting greatly from these DPA relaxations. We've got WISPs all over the country. In Central California, Oasis is so thrilled that the China Lake DPA has been reduced. They were suffering from a lot of those China Lake interruptions, and they're very happy, and I believe their customers are also very happy. Same thing with Maersk at the port of LA. They are no longer being interrupted from the China Lake operations, and I know that that's been extremely helpful for them too. So, this is just, it's wide-ranging, and again, we are very happy with, what we've been able to achieve here together, and look forward to even further improvements through the FCC's NPRM that we're, looking forward to responding to, and I think through further enhancements above 6 meters, looking at what can be done to, to improve propagation modeling there. And I'm sure we will continue to iterate on this and learn, and then again, apply it to other frequency bands going forward. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Preston, did you have a comment?
Yeah, a couple of things. China Lake's interesting. Every time China Lake activated, I sent a message to the deputy CIO, email, to the spectrum management at NTIA. I think we just wore them down with our emails on shutting down the entire San Diego area. So sometimes being spammer works. So you know, it's important we have a metric for did we succeed in this effort. Okay, we've redone parts of CBRS. And so I have found the best metric for have we done the job, and the one that led us to ask for 2.0 was to go through the early thinking in 5G, Next Generation Mobile Network Alliance, and I'll publish a whole pile of 5G use cases. And I think they're a wonderful list of, if we're doing it right, all of those should be on CBRS. We should be enabling all of them. And they are heavily indoors, telematics, robotics, not so wild about people walking down the street doing AR, but I believe in their house it makes sense, or virtual reality outside. It's not a good idea, maybe AR a little bit. But when you go through those use cases, we didn't really see them emerge because of the limitations that we've talked about with shutting people down. That most of those cases were where that red was in Andy's charts. So that's really the litmus test. We should all come back here 2 years from now and say, have we seen factories move into CBRS in large scale? We have the example that was just mentioned, but have we seen it in large scale? We know that in Germany, local licensing has been very successful for the automotive industry. Have we seen these grow? And so I think the 5G community did a very good job of laying out what are the goals for wireless penetration with things other than handsets, you know, get away from handsets. And that's the metric we should apply to ourselves. In fact, it became the basis for the book Mike was so nice to plug. And so we need to be doing an assessment, not this time just looking at how many radios, which is what we did the last time around with NTIA, but are we truly enabling the use cases that enable manufacturing in the society? That's what, we were doing fine on numbers. What we were seeing was we were missing out this opportunity. And so now we need to be more fine-grained. It's not just about hundreds of thousands of radios. It's about, are we enabling all the pieces of the economy and society that we can? Are we making the best opportunity out of CBRS as compared to just doing more of the same? And so I think that's the challenge we all face. I think the FCC, we all face it when we deal now with the FCC. They kind of changed the game. Now they've got CBRS 3.0 coming. And as we think about what's in CBRS 3.0, we shouldn't be thinking it will look like 2.0 or 1.0 or like handsets in the 90s. What do we want it to look like? What parts of America aren't being served well by the current communications environment that we can now solve with CBRS? So we need to be more subtle. We need to be a little more insightful and a little more targeted as we go this next spin of CBRS. But if we do half as well as we did this time, it'll be pretty awesome.
Yeah, thanks, President. And that really is what you heard. I think it's, you know, going down this line is really just a sampling of the use cases. One thing I think, if you're interested, the OnGo Alliance on their site has a nice kind of concise booklet that shows use cases in a lot of different areas. At our event here last October 31st, we included, you know, Dow Chemical, the biggest chemical processing plant in the world is using CBRS. John Deere, who actually wanted to be here but couldn't, they're deploying it at their manufacturing facilities across the Midwest. Chevron in their oil refinery campuses and facilities all across Texas, Oklahoma, and elsewhere, where they really want to control their own private networks. They want to customize them. They want to control the security. So for critical infrastructure, it's really important to have more access to this kind of spectrum. So press also kind of bridged to my question, which is CBRS 2.0 is a big leap forward. Another 72 million Americans without any interruption in their potential use for broadband. But what is CBRS 3.0? Both the FCC's Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC, and NTIA's Commerce Spectrum Management Advisory Committee, CSMAC, both put out reports within the past year that had a list of some other things that could be improved. So I know I'm just wondering, maybe save Preston till last on this one, but if you, I don't know if you all could whether either you know you're focused on something or what you'd like to see improve further.
Is that me or someone else?
Well, you can't. I don't want to force you to be
Okay,
first
all
on
right,
this. but-
no worries. First is always the best place to be. Okay, so in thinking about that, the way I see that we need to make some improvements is probably with IT tools and embracing technologies and creating, I won't say environments, but I would say creating opportunities for more information sharing that includes planning. So, and I think a good demonstration of that was through such forums as CSMAC and PATHIS and other working groups. So when we're in the working groups, when we're trying to do the coordination, that's where the metal meets, or I guess the metal meets the road or whatever type of thing. But that's when you roll your sleeves up and you take the opportunity after we DBD everything, so you engineers, the DBs and all of that, we're down to 1 DB, what can we do technically? So the technical part is done, and now we have to make that operational assessment on what can we all gain behind that. So I know, some people might say it's a trust factor. I don't think it's a trust factor when you get in the room. I think it's one of those things where you try to harmonize the multi-actor perspective. We come into the room, industry has their perspective, DOD knows what we need to protect, so we're in the room saying, okay, relax, what can we do? And like I said previously, how do we get to a yes? So with all the information on the table and all the technical analysis, once that's complete, now it's a no kidding, what can we do? So on a Navy perspective, we always try to lean forward. We always try to come from a place of what can we do, because we want to enjoy some of those devices as well. Okay.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of things that already TAC and CSMAC has been talking about, and whether it's improving on the propagation model, right? We obviously solve for below 6 feet. We're looking to solve for higher heights. If you look at the way we calculate the granularity and the aggregation of the propagation, I'm sure Jennifer will be happy to not have to compute every night large sums of data. We want to be very, very quick on making some of the decisions when there's an DPA activation, how quickly can we get back to the normal sort of state, right? And so between the complications of the calculations and, ESC has its own, areas that we need to improve on. So whether it's a combination of ESC and IIC or TARDIS-3, those are some of the areas that I think we definitely have more opportunities to improve upon. And I absolutely look forward to, getting to those solutions.
Yeah, I think there are, as you said, there's a laundry list of additional improvements that we'd like the FCC, NTIA, DoD to consider here. I know one topic that has been a bit of a third rail, but the prospect of allowing higher power operations. And, excuse me, if higher power operations are allowed, which would improve, for instance, coverage in rural areas in particular. What would the protections and the coexistence guardrails that would be necessary to protect existing users and especially low and medium power users? How do we find that right balance between allowing more flexibility on the power and making sure those who've already invested in systems are not being negatively impacted? Out-of-band emission limits. The CBRS 2.0 as we like to call it, very tight, and our neighbors are not as tight. And I think there could be a lot of benefits gained if we start looking at relaxing some of those OOBE limits and having a greater parity between CBRS and the adjacent bands. Again, long list of specific things that we could bring up, but again, lots of opportunity to continue to improve upon this band, and we're looking forward to the next leap in growth, as Preston mentioned.
So I am also I'm chairman of the ONGO Alliance, and I made the mistake at our last meeting of saying, would people please turn in their ideas on what they want changed in the band?
You stuck me with them.
Yeah, yeah. No, only some of them. No, some of them were too radioactive even for you. But what we found was I sort of had three bins. There are some that are wins for everybody, and the out-of-band emission makes sense. This was a 5 watts, 40,000 kilometer away band. When we started CBRS, it's now how many megawatt EIRP, adjacent neighbor. So like these are no-brainers. And then we have a pile of issues that are a lot of people win, but a few lose, become zero-sum, like most spectrum issues. I've really enjoyed reading filings in like the KU band to watch people tearing each other apart, because it didn't happen in my band. I think we're now heading to where we start to see a lot of these zero benefit. High power helps some communities in CBRS, it hurts others. So I'm hoping we can create a little bit of leadership over these so we don't end up with the government having to arbitrate a food fight. And we in industry can come together, try to take some of the outliers off the table and converge and give the government a coherent position, much like we've been able to do towards NTIA. I think we all spoke as one to NTIA and made it very possible for NTIA to move out. I hope looking towards the ripping the scab off, if you will, that FCC's done now on the rules, that we can have the same kind of coordination, that the industry bodies can function to create some cohesive positions and have a lot of this high power, low power dialogue, forced coexistence versus voluntary coexistence. Those are dialogues we need to have in industry and hopefully come up with a consensus that we can bring forward. I'd hate to have it being done through releases and this and that trade press. So I think it remains to be seen if we can maintain the cohesiveness we've been able to do technically with IJWG towards the government and act as one industry. We're not that big and successful that we can afford to be spending our resources arguing amongst ourselves.
Okay, in a few minutes we'll see if there's any questions from the audience before we wrap at 12. But one other kind of general question for you all, just following up on this quickly, if anyone has a thought on how best to institutionalize this type of collaboration that led to CBRS 2.0. I mean, is it fine as is? I mean, I think we all got the impression it was intense but informal. Is there anything else, anything that should institutionalize this sort of collaboration?
So I deeply offended Scott Harris in this room 3 months ago, I think it was, when you had your event here.
Yeah.
When I asked him, aren't you really the regulator for spectrum sharing? And the lawyer, because as a lawyer, of course, they're not a regulator. But to some extent, with the National Spectrum Strategy, NTIA is very much of a public-facing regulator, not just to federal users, but to us in industry. Some of our SaaS customers are very upset with us that they have no idea what's going on in our interactions with NTIA. They can see it visibly when the FCC. They can't really see the discussions that we've talked about here with NTIA. So I do think as we move towards spectrum sharing being the norm and not the exception, we have to think a little bit about the mechanism for these interactions, not the whole Administrative Procedures Act and Chevron and all those other issues, but how do we make this process a little more open and a little more transparent? We were really successful this time because I believe sincere, well-meaning people were willing to do things, but you hate to depend on individuals. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to be thinking long-term about if spectrum sharing is the strategy, what's the mechanism for making that happen in a spectrum world where we as sharing partners have two bosses, FCC and NTIA. There's some work to be done here. Nothing urgent, but we should make this more normal.
Elvira, did you have?
Well, actually, yes. So I was thinking I was going to be first again, but anyway. So when I look up just sharing in general, and you look at the bands that are being proposed. Those are different challenges, so you can't, and different systems in the band, so you can't expect maybe a CBRS framework, or if you do, it needs to evolve better. So definitely looking forward to how we can do that. And also, I just want to plug a couple of things that, so whatever sharing framework we come up with, we need to recognize that it needs to be more flexible. Again, CBRS was good, and I don't know if it was just the personalities in the room, but I think we all had the idea of where we wanted to get to, the end state. So the end state was trying to come together to figure out a way to share. And I think as we move forward to other bands, we're going to come to that same conclusion, that that's the end state. How do we get to yes?
No, that how do we get to yes is a great philosophy, and something I think we can write on the next sticky pads that we send out to people as we look at additional bans and at CBRS. When the original protections were put in place for CBRS, DoD admitted and said that they were being very conservative, and that was a reasonable position to take on a brand new thing. But having the commitment to take another look at it and look for additional opportunities for improvement was fantastic. And I think we just need to remind ourselves we should do that all the time. This should be a regular event where we look at what can be continually improved, and then again, how can it be adapted and extended to other bands and other situations. We've learned an awful lot here with CBRS, and the work that we've collectively done should not be overlooked, should be leveraged, enhanced, and adapted to other bands, other scenarios, and continuously improved. So if we can put that in place, that mechanism to do a check, I think we're going to be in good shape.
These multi-stakeholder groups just provide a natural sort of structure. I want to ask one more targeted question before seeing if there's audiences. I don't think we've heard enough of what Jonathan is doing. Jonathan, I wanted to ask you, why was Miami Airport, interested in private mobile or, private networks in the first place, and in CBRS? I mean, you had Wi-Fi, right? So what drove you toward, using CBRS and building out a private network?
Sure, I'd love to answer that. I want to go back to the last question first for a
Oh,
moment.
yeah, oh, sure.
From an end user perspective, we being an airport and being an end user, there's a lot of information, a lot of people in here that know all the ins and outs of CBRS, and all that information is not disseminated to everyone within the ecosystem. So there's a lot of people who aren't necessarily adopting CBRS because they think they're at risk that may not actually be there. But I think if start to effectively communicate a little bit more, maybe over communicate, that will help to get even greater adoption for the platform. In regards to why we embarked upon this journey at MIA, Miami National Airport last year we had 52.3 million passengers. We have a 3,300 acre campus, and we have over 700 million square feet of terminal space. So we would like to transform our airport to a smart airport. And in order to do that, we need IoT devices. And in order to do that, you need connectivity. So now when you start to talk about the traditional methods of doing that, you're talking about cable, conduit, building permits, projects. Years go on and we still don't have the job done. I'm retired and a couple other people are retired, and we're still working toward trying to get this installed. Here comes CBRS, and we find through that we're able to actually have this connectivity, and we can start to scale much quicker than we could before. And from a return on investment perspective, I can give you a couple of use cases that we're benefiting from right now. We have over 400 plus moving walkways, escalators, and elevators at Miami International Airport. We started to install sensors on our escalators and moving walkways. They're to inform us when an escalator is working or not working. If you think about this as a traveling public, when you go and you're walking with your kids and your 5 suitcases, and all of a sudden an escalator or elevator doesn't work, you're probably not happy. And if you're at MIA, you're not happy with us. So we want to address that. So first what we did is we installed those sensors and we backhauled those using CBRS. We brought them into our Geospatial Enterprise Architecture, or our ESRI platform. From that ESRI platform, we integrated it into our incident management system, and then from there now we're automating those requests when elevator or escalator moving walkway goes down, so that the technician can then be dispatched to come out and fix the problem. Prior to that, we were actually having to utilize human capital to walk around to look at each one of these things to make sure they're working 24/7, 365, to make our traveling public, make sure that we're taking care of them. In the second initiative, they have a platform through video analytics. There's a platform that does aircraft turnaround tracking. So from the time that the plane pulls up, put the chocks on it, to the time it turns around and leaves, it, through predictive analytics, starts to say, okay, this is what's going to happen. And based on this, they can start to predict whether aircraft's going to leave on time, be delayed, et cetera. When we initiated a pilot, we were going to do this with the traditional means of structured cabling. And for 2 cameras at 2 gates was $70K plus to install that. We have 131 gates at MIA. So you start to do the math, but I can put 1 baseband unit outdoor. I can light up 17, 18 gates for maybe $100,000. You start looking at the return on investment of that, that's huge. So when you look at that, and then that plus taking all this data, bringing it back into our data lake, extracting it, transforming it, loading it into our business intelligence, now I'm able to provide, or we are able to provide, roles and personas based on different things for different users in our airport to make data-driven decisions. So for us, it's much bigger than just CBRS. CBRS is a means to an end of something that we hopefully is going to be much more bigger and make us the greatest airport in the world. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're almost at time, but so who has the burning question out there? Okay, in the back, and tell everyone who you are. We have many more people. I know that's Masood, but
yeah, so
we got many more people online.
Thank you. Just want to make a quick comment. I think that's pretty important. And Preston, by the way, I'm Masood Olfat from Federated Wireless. Preston mentioned that on the past, but I want to emphasize on that. I think even more important than the feature itself was the process that we ended up to here. And note that the process that we went through testing and certification, by we mean SaaS administrators. For release 1, it took us about 3.5 years. But this time, we proposed a self-testing regime to the government, to FCC, NTIA, and DOD. And fortunately, they accepted, and through very close collaboration with these 3 entities, and by including, even though we called it self-testing, but by including some representative from government who kind of oversaw the process, we were able to finish this process in a very reasonable time, very thorough, and efficient. So I want to really shout on that, and I want to appreciate all the government entities, and also all SaaS admins who collaborated very closely to come up with this. This is very important because you asked the last question. We are going to have a lot more to come. And if you make sure that the development, testing, and implementation and certification process is efficient, this is going to make CBRS and other shared band much more efficient. Thank you.
Yeah, good point that self-certification testing was made the end game on this super fast. Is there any other out here? Okay, right up front.
Hi, Kurt Jacobs from JMA. Thank you, and we're really excited as a U.S. company for these changes. I was wondering if you could speak to the panel about what you're seeing in terms of it innovating U.S. economic development and acceleration of 5G, unleashing our animal spirits of innovation, which I think is one of the objectives beyond making it better, but having shared spectrum that everybody's able to use. So if you just talk to those, unleashing that we're starting to see.
Yeah, I think the whole premise of the shared spectrum is also great example, right? You have so many other industries that are coming into this ecosystem that didn't exist in the past, right? So there are a lot of industries that want to own their own destiny, right? A lot of them don't necessarily want to rely on just the mobile operators. I would love for them to do that, but again, this has given rise to a lot of the small industry, and I think that's a great way of, and that's why we call this innovation spectrum, right? So that's what I think.
So I think we have to look that there are a lot of resources that come to bear to providing bandwidth that aren't necessarily we think of as bandwidth suppliers. After all, wireless is only like a little part of connectivity. And so one of our challenges as a nation has to be, how do we bring to bear all the connectivity resources that are out there? And if you want to talk close to people in business, then cable has massive connectivity that's close to people. Enterprises already own space, power, and backhaul within their facilities. And shared spectrum is the way to enable those resources to be exploited. Operators have towers, they have backhaul, they have power to towers, but they don't have that inside of buildings. They don't have it inside a factory. They don't have it inside people's homes like cable does. So I view spectrum sharing as sort of democratizing providing bandwidth by letting anyone who has a more economic way of getting access to backhaul power and siting to be able to provide it, because that's really what we want. What's the lowest cost to provide bandwidth capacity in a factory, in a home, on a street? And it's not selective towards any one community. It is enabling of all communities to come and play where they're better able to provide that. And so I think this is democratizing the provision of bandwidth. So whoever is got a fiber tail coming out of the ground can make use of that. They monetize it, that's good for them. They provide bandwidth, presumably at lower marginal costs, that's good for all of us. So I think that's the thing we ultimately have here, is to provide ways to make use of all the backhaul we have, rather than saying this industry provides backhaul to people, this does it only to buildings, this does it only inside buildings. Break down those walls. I think we're seeing it too.
Michael, may I just quickly raise my favorite story about CBRS is that the military agreed to share their spectrum with the commercial sector and is in turn benefiting from having access to all the commercial technology and capability for their own use in a different way. The Marine Corps base in Albany, Georgia is just a fantastic example, and JMA obviously knows that very well. Perfect example of full circle benefits of sharing spectrum, and obviously all of the other private and public wireless use cases that are being enabled, but DoD being able to do something new and different, I think is great.
Yeah, and we saw a video of Marines on the video telling us about taking us on a tour of that Marine base Albany for all their warehouse and supply chain operations using CBRS. So
Michael, if I can add one more. So one of the reasons why these innovations can happen is because you have very localized coverage, and that's possibly because of low power, right? And so these localized coverages are very, very important.
There was one
we
last
have a
question here we could fit in if you all can be quick in answering it. Yeah, right. You right here.
Devlin Cassidy from Norwich University as a DoD intern here for the summer. So I just wanted to get from a take on the enterprise standpoint. As you come into a space that was primarily owned by the Department of Defense, is there any concerns from your end as risks associated as you develop technologies that go into these spaces of where you potentially are vulnerable to like adversary capabilities? I know that China, back in like late April, early May, said that they were very close on finishing their quantum expansions and things like that. That will eventually affect all of our technologies if that is finalized. So are you guys concerned on a security aspect for your technologies to be protected so that way you guys can still effectively use the spectrum? Thank you.
It's probably Elvira's question.
No, I think that was...
There you go. Oh, right. Okay, you didn't necessarily mean national security, but also the
Protection,
the IoT. Right. Yeah, that's why I mentioned in terms of Chevron before. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two aspects of this, right? One, making sure that DoD's primary mission is being protected in this band, right? And we have done a lot of work collaboratively with on the Navy, with DoD, to make sure that we are obfuscating the data that is used to administer the protections. And I think we will be working closely with them on, again, expanding this system and capability to additional bands and looking for new ways to make sure that that is protected. I think the second part of your question was more based on as electric cooperatives or ports or other the international airports start using wireless technology. How are they reinforcing their security and their network to make sure that it is protected? And I would turn to the expert over here on how that goes down.
Yeah, so it was a great question. And from an enterprise perspective for us, we have safeguards in place, obviously from a cybersecurity perspective, and we've added CBRS into that methodology. We've gone ahead through those risk assessments. And so now we've implemented with that in place. I'd like to say that, when we looked at this as compared to Wi-Fi, we felt a little bit better about it in that it's a subscriber identity module that we're putting in there, which is something we don't have with Wi-Fi. And through our own monitoring, we know, at least within our own network, there have been where we have tried to see people who have tried to attack our network through the wireless or Wi-Fi arena. So we feel pretty comfortable about where we're at with CBRS, and we're trying to use that finally for our business class systems, and we're trying to take our wireless Wi-Fi infrastructure and have it forward-facing for you as the passenger. When you get to the airport, you want to get on the Wi-Fi. That's what we're trying to get for you, and then everything else we're doing, we're trying to put on CBRS.
All right, well, please join me in thanking the panel. And thanks to all of you for coming. This is great to see so many folks in person and a lot more people online. Thanks for joining us. We have this event archived on our YouTube channel and website, so come back and watch it and take a look at that handout to understand the details. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.